back at it again. It's another edition of the State of Football with your host, RIC, and a place to be, Rick Saratelli, telling it like it is. Since 2002, it's what we do here on the State of Football. Madon Mami, State of Football Part 14. Unbelievable. Ooh. Each and every day. Our third week here, breaking it down. Listen, it's the show that brings you in the know from the industry side. We've got a great panel of experts here today. We have a lot of hot topics on the docket with the Big Ten parents getting set to storm the headquarters there tomorrow. The new commissioner there at the Big Ten coming out and defending his decision. We'll discuss that a little bit. August 29th. We've got football, folks, just 9 days away. It's happening. You saw some non-conference games being scheduled yesterday. The Citadel at Clemson, September 12th. Miami at UAB, September 10th. BYU at Navy, September 9th. Southern Miss at South Alabama, September 3rd. There's a slew of games on the docket. Can you smell the pigskin? Ooh, I can. What does it all mean? Senior Bowl watch. That's always like Christmas to the Draftnik community. Draft Twitter is probably salivating all morning long, scouring that list of top 250 prospects. Of course, it's all brought to you by the NFLDraftBible.com, bringing you the names you need to know first. And, of course, my weekly morning co-host here, John Murphy, up in Toronto. He's actually below me today next to Marvin Jones, who checks in from Colorado. We've got David Turner in Arizona. And, right up the Garden State Parkway here in New Jersey, Christian Dyer making his season debut on the State of Football here, the Jets Sports Illustrated beat reporter. And let's start right there, fellas, because we're going to have a little bit of fun and count you down into the NFL season, and we'll dive off with the NFL. If you tuned in yesterday, we started off with college football, but let's talk a little New York Jets because there's all kinds of rumors, rumblings, the Yannick Ngakoue sightings in the Newark airport. I don't know what's true, what's not. There's a lot of smoke signals. John Murphy, I'll start it off with you, but this is important to say. Be careful before you rush to judgment on a trade because you know what? There was a lot of debate, pretty much 50-50 on who won that Jamal Adams trade. Now, all of a sudden, he flips even one of those picks in exchange for Ngakoue. That trade looks a whole lot better. Rumor is Jets are in the mix. John, what are you hearing? What's your take?
Well, it'll be interesting to see. Did he fly into Newark Airport to visit the Jets or to go a little further south down the turnpike and visit the Eagles or possibly both? So I think it'll be very interesting to see how the Jets handle using all of this draft capital, right? Where Joe Douglas came from with the Ravens, that was gold. They didn't trade it. They used it. And you saw how great Ozzie Newsome and Eric DeCosta have been able to use draft picks. We mentioned them throughout the draft. This year, how well Baltimore was able to situate themselves and then make the most of those picks. And you look at a lot of the names on their Ravens roster, it was development, not making trades. Whereas the Eagles have been very willing to do whatever they need to do for a given season. So a veteran pass rusher in a year that anything goes and the both the NFC and AFC East seem a little more wide open, than normal. It definitely will position either one of those two teams to be better short term and for the Jets potentially better long term if they were to be able to acquire and then re-sign to an extension, a guy like that, because you know what you're getting. Okay, it's going to cost you $15 to $20 million, but you know what you're getting for a pass rusher, something they need, something they have not done well in investing, their resources in recent memory. So to get a guy and you know what you're getting, and you're using a draft pick potentially from a past trade, that would be another big step in the right direction from what we've seen. A lot of positive steps out of Joe Douglas so far.
John Murphy, of course, Vice President of Player Personnel up there for Toronto Argonauts, giving you that executive perspective. Let's go over to someone who played for the Jets, Marvin Jones, a former first-round pick for New York. Marvin, obviously, and Ngakoue, just to be clear, the deadline has passed for franchise players to negotiate a long-term contract, so he'll still remain under this current deal, from my understanding. But Marvin, it seems like one position, especially on defense, the Jets have kind of been ignoring as a pass rusher. A big need here. Do you like the fit?
Well, I'll tell you what. I do. I think over the years, just watching the Jets, they have been missing that big dominant guy. I mean, you go back, 3-4 years. I mean, they've pretty much dissembled the team. As I know that Jamal is probably, I think he's one of the last guys. I'm not sure with that was under the Todd Bowles era. That pretty much all of those guys have gone in the last 5 or 6 years. They really don't have any guys that have been with the team probably longer than that. So I guess this is where they kind of put in their own stamp with Joe Douglas. I think has done a fine job so far. I think one of the things that, has caused a lot of the issue has been, a lot of the relationships between the player and the head coach type of stuff, obviously, which that seems to play a role into how, the reaction with Jamal Adams not wanting to be there, because that's one of the things that he mentioned is the relationship with the head coach, and which is a very important one. And that seems to be kind of a thing that is kind of followed. I mean, we kind of saw a little bit of the same thing down in Miami also with the players. And one of the things about a head, for me as in a head coach is it was very tough for me being a Jet player 11 years. I mean, I had 6, 7 head coaches. So I have a lot of experience with good coaches, not so good coaches. And, from having, Bruce Coslick to playing for Pete Carroll, Rich Kotite, Bill Parcells, Al Groh, Herm Edwards. So I've had pretty much every different personality of coach, and I know I've found out the common thread that goes along with the winning part of it. And those guys that all won had one thing in common. And they had a very good relationship with players, but they treated all the players equally. They never felt like this guy had special treatment. Vinny Testaverde got the same treatment that Marvin Jones got versus the guy that walked off the bus yesterday. We were all treated the same way. They ran stiff programs. The head coach was, no matter what happened on the head coach, Bill Parcells, Pete Carroll, all those guys took care of that and put those kind of fires out. They were pretty honest with players about everything. And I think that's the common thread that we kind of hear about coming out of New York now, is that, there's instances where if there's fires in the locker room, the head coach isn't, addressing those type of things. And as the head coach, whether you win or lose, no different than me as a player. I showed up every damn week, win or lose, no matter how bad, whether I played, I thought I had a great game that day, I thought I had my worst game. I sat up in front of the media and answered and addressed those questions, because that's the part about being a leader of an organization. You take the good and the bad, and you got to face that head on. And players, especially players, most players can smell or see right through coaches a lot of time. And once that happens and you lose the team, it's very difficult to regain them. And we, as myself, that was a veteran player, I knew within 5 minutes if this was a head coach that was going to be successful with our team or one that wasn't, because of just how the approach is. And, you've seen it over and over again, just like now. I mean, I'm a head coach in pro arena football right now. I can tell you within the first time I meet the organization, I already know what the issues are, because there's certain stamps that are synonymous with certain types of behavior, certain types of, reactions that go with losing versus winning. And I think that's one of the things, especially when you talk about the Jets over the years, any coach they get in there is going to be attached to the whole history. He's not coaching. He's not just coaching for being a coach there for 2 years. You're going to get blamed from everything since the AFL merger with the organization. I don't think we won a Super Bowl since I've been alive.
69. Well, let me ask you this, Marvin. I don't mean to cut you off, but since you are that head coach now there at the Omaha Beef in the Indoor League, so you play that role. And I know the Jets bring in the legends every year, so you've been around the team. But I want to go back to, you talk about the head coaching job in New York for the Jets being a revolving door. Now, Joe Douglas, there's no players left from the Todd Bowles regime, but he inherited Adam Gase. So you've been around the team. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Is he the guy that's going to be long-term for that team?
Well, one thing I will say, one thing I do playing for Mr. Johnson myself and knowing Chris and knowing Woody, one thing about them, when they make a commitment to somebody, sometimes you can kind of loyalty, sometimes you can kind of stick to it too, sometimes, especially when it comes to head coaching. And they say we're going to make this commitment because when Adam Gase was hired, he came in and they touted him as an innovator. Well, and a lot of times you can kind of see whether that goes in the first year. A lot of times on the coach, I mean, I think he retained, eight coaches were retained from Todd Bowles' staff still there. So a lot of time, I mean, they think they probably was going to bring some type of consistency. But Mr. Johnson and both of the Johnsons are pretty loyal guys they don't want to look bad if they make that type of decision when you bring a guy in and say, and this is the guy's an innovator and this guy's going to change things, and it doesn't happen right away. Because there's always things, especially in the NFL, to where they can look to blame it on somebody. Like, for instance, well, what is the production of Sam Darnold? I mean, we have a young quarterback. So that can always be a reason that he hasn't grown into what type of quarterback he is. But at the same time, that's Adam Gase's specialty. And sometimes in football, we get too committed to a person's past. If you take away, no different with Adam Gase being in Denver with Peyton Manning, then how does that career look without that season on the Peyton Manning? Hell, I could coach Peyton Manning. The best way you coach Peyton Manning is leaving the hell alone.
No, I mean, and that's a great point and a great perspective, too. I'll go over to David Turner because you bring that scout and that personnel executive side of decision-making into the process. 5 NFL teams, arena teams, CFL teams. So Joe Douglas, he's kind of positioned himself here to accumulate all these draft picks. He's taken some criticism for not surrounding the Sam Darnold with enough weapons. But more importantly, with Joe Douglas, he inherited this quarterback. He inherited this head coach. And to his credit, he's giving them that opportunity, another opportunity that some people feel might be too long. What's your whole take on what he's done in this short period of time, and is he set up to build a successful team, David?
Well, I know Joe from the rounds, and Joe and I have gone back always. And you know what? I've always thought Joe had the patience and to be a great architect of teams, and I think that's what you're seeing with Joe right here. He's not only accumulating picks, which he learned in Baltimore as draft commodity, but he's also positioning himself with key cornerstones he can get through free agency, and he's not overpaying and going to get himself in cap trouble. That's something that Joe, I think, has learned from Baltimore and brought with him to the Jets. And you're going to see one thing when Mike came into the Jets, he had like $60 million in cap space. By the time Mike was leaving, they had to do a fire sale. A lot of veterans got cut the last year or two because they didn't have any more cap space. And juggling the cap when you're team building, as John can attest, is one of the hardest things as a GM because it makes you forced into certain decisions. But the better you plan for it, and the more young talent that you truly have on your roster, it makes it easier because those contracts are longer and they're more cap friendly. So therefore, what Joe did with the trades and what he did, I thought he had a fantastic draft this year. I really thought you saw a Raven-esque draft. It was one of the better drafts the Jets have had in the past few years. And I commended him on our live draft show, if you remember, how Joe did and how his scouts they regained trust in that building. A lot of Jet scouts were around that building not feeling trusted for a lot of years under the prior GMs. Now I talk to the Jets guys and they feel like Joe's listening. He's included and created a group that wants to come to meetings, that the passion of football to find players are back in the building. So the culture change isn't overnight. And I think Joe is the right guy for the job, even though he inherited Adam and he inherited Sam. He's a guy who's very patient. He's very diligent. He chops wood, comes to work every day. He's a grinder, and he's a guy that I think will be a fantastic architect of a team. and one day the dividends will pay off. You just got to give him you got to give Joe a year, 2 years, 3 years before you're going to really see the team come to fruition, because you can't just switch teams over in 12 months. It doesn't work that way. You got to switch them over 24, 36 months to really have the sustained success type situation pay off for 5, 6, 7, 8 year run. If you think you're just going to flip, like I think John was talking about how he likes to do all the time in Philly, he'll just, he'll flip for that year. He'll try to win, quickly. And then, the next year, we'll figure it out next year. Joe Douglas is more of a patient architect that's going to chop wood and try to build a core like you saw at the Ravens. You see the core of the Ravens, that defense was built. It sustained for years with Ray and Reed and Suggs, and then they built around those guys, and then, that's how they did it. Similar approach already is being taken by Joe. I think he's going to be a long-time GM at the Jets, and the Jets fans ultimately will be happy with him being there.
Yeah, and as John Murphy here is saying in our internal chat room, Joe Douglas is not locking the scouts out of the draft room. He's not as paranoid as a Mike McCagnon once was. I know Christian Dyer's been waiting patiently. Before we get to him, David, I just want to ask you, Yannick Ngakoue, if he does good to the Jets, obviously it's a great deal if it's for a second-round pick, but even if it's for a first-round pick, do you like the fit? Do you like the deal for the Jets?
I think he's a great fit for Greg Williams' defense. Look how Greg asks what he asks of his defensive ends and players. He's an aggressive player, strong player. I think this is a good, again, you shop for certain cornerstones and pay for them, like Murphy was saying. If they're worth the money and they fit your coach's scheme and they fit what you do, you buy that guy. And you bring him in, you give your coach that weapon to use. And this is a guy who not only is a good player, but now you're finding a good fit for your coach's scheme. So you got a cornerstone you can build around for a lot of years by bringing this kid in. It's a great fit. I think the kid would be happy playing for Williams. I think this is a perfect, ideal situation if they can work out a deal.
Well, they need some cornerstone players to build around, so let's go over to our residential Jets guru. He is the beat writer for Sports Illustrated. Make sure you check him out at Christian R. Dyer on Twitter. Christian, we talked about a lot of the draft, and David just mentioned a good draft. You've been profiling it on the Sports Illustrated website, but he has taken some criticism for lack of weapons. And you see the depth at wide receiver where they have to go and get a guy like Chris Hogan off the streets. I know yesterday they worked out Dante Moncrief. Where are the playmakers? Where are the weapons to throw to? How is Sam Darnold going to have any success without guys who can make plays?
Yeah, I think it's a question that's very relevant on both sides of the ball. Where are the playmakers on defense? You lose Jamal Adams in a trade. I know we can probably debate that, whether it was a good trade or a bad trade. I'm certainly on the side that it was a good trade. You lose C.J. Mosley, who opted out. He was one of your only 2 Pro Bowl, all-pro players on the defensive side of the ball. And that's where I think an Ngakoue can certainly come on in and be pivotal in terms of how we can upgrade and give someone who's a little bit feared on that defense. But on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's a valid question. And it's really a matter of priorities this offseason for general manager Joe Douglas. When you look, priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 was getting that offensive line up to par. And we saw with Robbie Anderson, who I think is a good, solid number 2 in the league last year, he wasn't effective because he couldn't go through the route tree because Sam Darnold was usually being picked off the ground by the point that Anderson was turning around looking for the ball. Jamison Crowder was effective in the slot. But outside of that, I really think that the Jets offense had a hard time because they couldn't, to quote Bart Scott, stop a nosebleed. They were having a really difficult time just giving Darnold any kind of ability in the pocket to be able to do anything than to hit his hot read or to dump the ball off. And at the end of the day, that probably meant that the playmaker position suffered a little bit. Denzel Mims in the second round, I think, has good potential. He has the measurables you're going to want from a wide receiver. We also know that it's difficult for a wide receiver as a rookie to step in immediately. So I do think that probably free agency, the Jets needed to go out there. They got 3 brand new players in free agency who project as starters. They re-signed Alex Lewis along the offensive line, and then they drafted Mekhi Becton. Outside of that, they don't necessarily have a lot of space if they want to carry into 2021 when the salary cap could potentially come down a little bit because of everything going on with COVID and the pandemic. If they want to carry that money over, it may be a year away for Sam Darnold getting actual playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, which only to me elevates the importance of Le'Veon Bell, who I think is probably the one true playmaker, bona fide playmaker on the offense. Chris Herndon at tight end, who only had 1 catch, 7 yards because of suspension and then injuries last year. I think he may end up being an important and pivotal part of the offense this year. And then you're looking for the same level of contributions from Jamison Crowder and Denzel Mims. It's not exactly the greatest show on turf, but I think with an improved offensive line, there's a little potential for this offense to be better. It can't be much worse than last year, let's be honest.
I think Brashad Perryman is in the mix there too. But yeah, when Jamison Crowder is your most accomplished wide receiver, that's tough sledding. Christian, I know you have to boogie. You're on a tight deadline. I appreciate your patience here, waiting for your turn on the horn. Any parting shots you want to tell the people at home what you got cooking there on the Jets website for Sports Illustrated?
No, I don't want to do that. I want to talk about Brashad Perryman. I think he's a good guy. I got a few more minutes too. If we want to hit up anything else.
Do you want to fire off any questions to one of these guys about the Jets?
Well, I want to ask what Rick's diet is, because this man is looking slim, looking svelte right now. He turned sideways, and he's going to disappear on camera. My man is looking good. I don't
know about that. A lot of seafood down here at the Jersey Shore. I can tell you that.
Yeah, you seafood and you eat it.
Oh,
that's a lot of that going on too.
That's
absolutely. Well, John, I'll go back over to you. Any parting shots here on terms of what anybody else said? Any follow up on the Jets?
Well, I mean, I think it's a difficult, scenario when you look at that division. Buffalo, we know what we think of them at the moment. Again, until New England gets knocked out, you're at least judging that they're going to be better coached, more disciplined. They know how to run the football regardless. It doesn't matter who gets the ball every year. They run the football effectively most times, most years, and they're way more accomplished, at least defensively. Their offensive line may have some struggles, much like the Jets. But you just look at the other aspects of it. They were terrible in terms of starting field position last year. They averaged 3.3 a carry, with Le'Veon Bell, and the aforementioned terrible offensive line. And, you just look and say, like, where are these guys getting those extra victories that you need to start showing, some signs of life, with, like I said, Buffalo and Miami coming now, that roster is starting to look a lot better in Miami than it has. And it's starting to take a little shape there. And it seems like Chris Greer and Flores, it looks like they're on the same page. And are we not kind of destined to what we started out saying, which is, this season's going to go how it goes, somewhere between 7 on the high end, 4 probably on the low end. We're headed toward what we're headed toward, which is at some point Joe Douglas hiring his own coach. It's going to happen eventually. I mean, the last 3 seasons, the 10-6 season is looking more like a mirage in Adam Gase's career, than the starting point. It's 3 more losing seasons, and it's an offense that scored 276 points last year. There's a lot of improvement that the Jets would need to show, I think, even if they didn't get the victories. You got to get to 6-10, 7-8. You have to show progress this year, but I think you have to show that you and your coaching staff, someone between Darnold, Quinnen Williams, some of these guys that are thought of to have, higher talent than what they've shown on the field, better start making their way, towards success, because a lot of your best plays or best players are not achieving to that level. And you're often replacing the butt fumble with things that are happening under your time, as the coach of the team. Like, we need to see Greg Williams' defense show up and get to where these other teams are defensively, and we need to see Darnold take a step similar to Josh Allen, right? We need to see that next step. We got the turnovers have to go down, and I think just the play production has to improve, because you can't have the worst starting position of any team in a division in terms of field position and then add to it 3 yards a carry and then say, I'm putting it on this quarterback with those guys. I mean, the factor that the Jets beat writer is telling us that Chris Herndon, not Tony Gonzalez, Chris Herndon might be a big part of somebody's offense. That's not a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, listen, arguably.
That's not a really good sign for that guy who is probably 25th to 32nd in the NFL in terms of if you graded tight ends. If that guy is going to be a pivotal part of your offense, start looking at the top 10 guys in next year's draft.
Well, to that point, Le'Veon Bell is probably the best pass catcher on the team. They did bring in Frank Gore. I don't know how much we're going to expect out of him this year, Marvin, but people don't realize the Jets went 6-2 down the stretch. They won 7 ball games. Now, they didn't play world beaters, and when they faced any semblance of a real team, the Baltimore Ravens, they lost by 3 touchdowns. But, you heard John say on the high end 7, should Jets fans have any higher expectations? Can playoffs be a possibility? Can the division be a possibility?
Well, I'll say this. One of the things with the Jets, especially, I mean, going like you went into last year about how they ended the season, which was great. I mean, when you want to see that type of progress towards the end of the season after you've had your bumps and bruises, and they did that. Now, always it's still going to boil down to the quality of competition, but one of the things that has hurt the Jets consistently over the years has always been all of the off the field related stuff, coaching stuff. There seems to be always some type of distraction in the off season, and it doesn't start the way it should be. You should have going off 7-6-2 season. You build in the off season. Well, guess what? They lose their arguably best player on the team. So that's a whole other dynamic, because the energy, we got to look at it this way. I look at it, Greg Williams is a coach that brings energy. That team, if they're going to have any hopes of winning, is going to be what they do on defense. Greg Williams is that guy. He's the guy that gets players excited about playing. So you got to have something to complement that, at least over on the offense. The offense has to have that same type of mentality that they have on defense when you have those type of teams. When the defense overshadows offenses like that, a lot of times it's not generally good results. But I think a lot of it, as you look, if you look at this team, there's a lot of holes. That's going to be a lot of question marks, especially over the years. It's been, like you said, it's been the pass rush. I mean, now you can look at how's the safety position going to play. I know Mays has been around a few years, but he's been dinged up. I mean, how's he's going to fit into that role without having that complimentary with Jamal Adams? How's McDougal's going to make that adjustment? So, I mean, which is Greg, one of the things I say about Greg Williams, I like about his defense, is anybody can play in his defense. He knows how to create some matchups, make guys look good, know how to, to protect his guys. But when you look defensively as a whole, I mean, it's going to be a tough job, but because they're probably not going to have – this is not the type of defense that – I mean, this team is not one to where you're going to have an offense that's going to have that slow start and play catch-up, because they don't have the weapons to play those come-behind games. They're probably not going to have those, like the first drive when teams go down and score on the first drive. It's probably not going to be a whole lot of those. And of my team to death. So it's just very difficult when you've seen over the years. I look at when I went to the Jets, we struggled in the beginning. We get Bill Parcells in. We had a huge culture change the dynamics of the team. We were probably one of the biggest winning teams towards the end of the 90s. under Parcells and then Herm Edwards and these guys and going to the playoffs and things. Those are all real cultural changes. And that is something that, the Jets are obviously having to go through, but you just can't go into all season every year with some type of drama unfolding. And that seems to be what's been going on with the Jets. So you have to have a positive all season. But
yeah, they're selling a lot of newspapers for the New York newspapers.
Yeah, but one of the great things is that it's not like previous years to where you have New England with Tom Brady either. So they're having those issues. So to me, it's always every year when I'm the New York Jets, I'm putting together a team. We always had to put together a team that had to compete with New England. New England, if they had the wide receiver, the Jets, if we want to beat them, we got to have the cornerbacks to match up well with these guys. But there's just another factor in building off what John Murphy said. Miami, has made some big strides, even last season with on the floor. So, and they made some off-season moves that a bit. Who doesn't want to play in Miami? Less taxes, anyway. But they made some great strides. So it's no longer the Jets looking at competing against New England. Well, you got another team that's in the same state, the Bills. So now you have two teams that are kind of replacing how New England was going into the off season. So, but we all know Belichick, and they're going to have some success just because he's that type of coach, and he knows how to get. If he got a guy that's a 5, he knows how to make him an 8, just based upon the way he's going to coach him in his discipline in the system that they bring up there. So it's just going to be tougher now, and I'm telling you, man, because Buffalo is deadly.
Yeah, well, they're the favorites right now.
A lot of young talent, too, and that's the thing. They're young. So, these guys are going – you're talking about these guys that's on these 4- and 5-year contracts. So that's what you got looking forward to for the next 3 years out of Buffalo. When you're a winning team, nobody wants to leave. Jamal Adams, if the Jets won 8 games last year, 8 or 9 games, well, Jamal Adams isn't going anywhere.
That's the last thing that Jets fans want to hear. And McDermott, to your point, Buffalo just extended him 5-year contract, so there's some stability in Buffalo. Christian, I see you wanting to chomp at the bit there and chime in. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
All I want to say is we know that Marvin's at a different stage of life now, and the reason why he wants to play in Miami is for the taxes. There's a long list of reasons why I want to be in Miami. These achy bones want to be in South Florida. There's some entertainment options down there and the weather, but the taxes, we know Marvin's at a whole different level in his thought process right now.
No doubt.
Well, absolutely.
One more parting shot from David Turner on the Jets will put them to rest. And you heard Marvin. I'll let you get your final shot, David, but you heard Marvin talk about Greg Williams. You saw what a job well done he did down the stretch with taking over for Cleveland a couple years ago. Yep. Should the Jets stumble out of the gates, see what I did? Should Greg Williams get an audition here as a head coach before they go into the offseason and do a thorough interview process?
I'm not one of those guys that likes to replace coaches during the season. I've been at that place before. I've seen it happen, and it's never successful. It's typically not successful for the organization in any way, and it's not successful for the coaches that are interviewing and trying to take over the team. So that's not something I would support. I was at the one of my first seasons in the NFL in 2003. I was at the Giants. And we were going to let Fossil go. Well, he still coached the last 4 games of the season. He knew he was going out the door. Everybody knew it came out in the press. We talked about it publicly. But he's still out. He coached out the rest of the season, and then he left, and we brought Coughlin in the next year. That's the old school mentality that I appreciate when people get a chance to finish what they start. And we ask players and people all the time, finish what you start. Well, as organizations, sometimes you don't keep the loyalty to the coaches and the people that you ask that of, and that's a sad thing. I really think that if you're going to start a season with somebody, you let them finish the season. If you have questions going into the season, Make that adjustment before you get to the season. Don't just carry that in and say, "Oh, no, I knew I should have fired that guy 4 games in, get him out." I mean, it's just like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? And again, if the NFL really ever wanted to have a true hiring process, I'll go off on a minute. But if they want to have a hiring process, they would put a hiring freeze at the back end of the season. So, after 3 weeks of the season, you couldn't hire anybody. And that would give an opportunity for everybody to be interviewed properly. You would have enough candidates to go through an interview. You would have the playoffs run its course enough to where everybody would have a chance to interview before any hires were made. That would give the NFL a real, absolute fair playing field for everybody to have a chance, because then you're not missing out on an opportunity on getting your assistant coaches. You're not running behind on anything else. There's not going to be a rush. A hiring freeze at the back end of the NFL season for just 3 weeks would give everybody a level playing field for everybody. And honestly, there's no rush to get it done in those 3 weeks, because you still have enough chances to get your GM in place, get your head coach in place, do what you need to do, even with 3 weeks at the tail end there. But again, I love Greg Williams as a passionate defensive coordinator, just like I love Norv Turner as a passionate, really calculated offensive coordinator. But to be a head coach, I think there's some gaps that aren't there to be the ultimate, top seat. I think they're great second seat guys. I think they're actually phenomenal second seat guys, but top seat guys, I just don't know if that's their take in life.
Interesting stuff here from David Turner. Christian Dyer, I think we kept you longer than anticipated. You want to put a ribbon on this Jets conversation? Tell the people at home where to find you, what's coming up?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity. This was a lot of fun. Learning about taxes in Florida is something I know I'm going to take with me for a little while. So this was a lot of fun, and been enjoying the work over at Sports Illustrated. So it's been a good opportunity to been covering the Jets since 2008. So, and I got the gray hairs to show it.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you hopping on. Hopefully we get you on again at some point. I know you and I will chat soon, my friend. So be well. Appreciate the time. Make sure you go follow him at Christian R. Dyer. Of course, this is the State of Football. We go around the horn here each and every morning, weekdays, 9 to 10. We can't stop. We won't stop bringing you the hot topics that you want to know, that you want to discuss, that you want to hear about. And, let's shift gears a little bit to college football, John. You've got players now opting out. We saw some more underclassmen declare their intent for the draft. We also see players who are opting out of the season and not declaring for the draft, so leaving it kind of up in the air. I saw an interview with Justin Fields with Good Morning America. Michael Strahan put him on the spot. Justin, now that the Big Ten season is canceled, are you going to be entering the draft? And, he's still holding out hope here that they can resurrect the season. Of course, we mentioned it at the top of the show, the Big Ten parents getting ready to bum rush the headquarters, and the new Big Ten commissioner coming out saying, hey, listen, the medical stuff is on our side. That's why we decided to declare. But, oh, by the way, August 29th, Austin Peay and Central Arkansas are going to kick off the college football season.
Yeah, I'm not sure if ESPN Game Day is going to be at that. Not exactly the opening day they were expecting. I think they were expecting to be in Atlanta. So no, you don't have to worry about social distancing in the stand. It'll take care of itself. But I think the most interesting part is, and you've seen this now, is that you've had, and we'll just, you hate to pick on somebody when we're dealing with a scenario as serious as we are, but you have to say the NCAA as a whole deserves the beating that they get, for not coming out and being more upfront. Even if you were just giving the same old line every week, with an update, you would at least be standing behind something to then give all three sides, the parents and kids, the universities, and the conferences, something to rally behind, or at least fall behind, so that it wasn't a daily and almost hourly, update from these different places. But we'll just take the Big Ten quickly and say you've had the head coach and the, athletic department at Nebraska say, well, hey, we're going to try to do our own thing, and then get slapped on the wrist and told, no, you're not. Then, then you had Michigan and Michigan State, especially the head coach in Michigan, saying, I don't know why we can't play. It's safer to do it this way. The kids are on campus. There's more protection and such. And now you've even seen Ohio State come out and say, well, we respect what he said, but we don't know if we really agree with it 100%. And, oh, by the way, we're going to say that it's not okay to play, but just in case something changes, we're going to keep practicing and doing everything we need to do right now, just in case we play either in the fall or in the spring. So you don't even have the schools in the same conference all agreeing with each other of what to do or how to do it. So no wonder you have these players opting out. And at the same time, you have parents not understanding, what's going on. And I believe it's at Ohio State where there's a player who is playing at Ohio State and his brother is at Colorado playing, and their parents are like, the factor that we're hearing one thing from one conference and one thing from another, both conferences have opted out, but neither one of them is giving the same answers to why they're opting out and how it's going to be any safer for my son to play in the spring than it is currently in the fall. Again, you can see why you have kids opting out and saying, I'm just going to take a break from this and figure out, my future when the time comes. You can see why guys that, as Russ Landy mentioned, and others have, if you're a top 50, top 100 kid, and you're suspect about what's going on, you're probably going to opt out and think, I can do better or not worsen my situation, by playing a limited schedule. And God forbid I do get anything with COVID. How is that going to get me judged by the NFL? What if I have to be taking these COVID tests leading up to the draft, to signify if I have any kind of, future issues that are going to, make me have to retire or opt out of football completely. So I think it's a very interesting path, to it. I mean, you seemingly think the Big Ten has basically laid down the law and said, we're not willing to take the risk associated with anything to do with the future medicals. Whereas I believe the ACC or the SEC, probably behind the scenes, their legal departments individually and collectively have said, we could handle any situation that comes up in the future based on this, up and including, unfortunately, the death of a player associated to having moved forward. Because if not, there's no way you're taking the field. Because David's mentioned it 100 times if he's mentioned it once. We don't know enough about all of this to not know that in the middle of the season, some kid that's been carrying it around doesn't end up getting it. And potentially, if they have it, does any of what they're doing, going to these practices, exerting themselves, getting their heart rates up and things like that, will any of that end up with somebody having a more severe case? We don't have the answer. So if you're agreeing to play, it means you're agreeing to assume the worst risk possible, which would be a kid passing from this naturally during a game or during a practice, or else you do not allow these kids back on the field ever until the springtime, with an antidote or with a different testing program every day to get yourself the information and knowledge you need. So I don't see, they can do everything they're doing. I don't think it's going to matter when it comes to the Big Ten or the Pac-12. I think they've already decided they're not taking that short-term or long-term risk, and they'll deal with the fallout of losing, what we've seen all these colleges saying, it's going to have a massive, massive effect on college life in general, not just college football or college basketball. If these programs lose this money in the fall and potentially into the spring, it's going to have a really catastrophic effect on college life in general, and probably something the government at some point will have to step in and help.
Yeah, and James Franklin has maybe been out in front of this and more outspoken than any of the Big Ten coaches, and basically saying, hey, it doesn't make sense. We're allowed to practice, but we can't play. We were told if we did X, Y, and Z and took the proper protocols and repercussions that we would be allowed to play. But, oh, by the way, we can practice. And I think it was Franklin who said, the problem is you're hearing so many different things to what the point was just made. You ask 5 different doctors their opinion, you get 5 different answers. And I'll go over to David Turner since John tagged you into the conversation. David, I know you touched base a little bit on the Maverick Sports Take podcast yesterday.
Yeah, thank you, because I'm very passionate about this subject, and what I don't like is I would keep putting children at risk for money. And that's exactly what we're doing here. The business side of it is ruling everything. And coaches and people can spin it any way they want. But, it's a young disease. It's a young virus, I should say. And we don't know enough about it. And therefore, we are finding and seeing more and more come out every day. And people go, well, they just said this last week. Guess what? We've only known about this 8 months. And that is very young for a disease. Medicine isn't like the rest of life. It takes a while, and as it continues to kind of split and start to mature or start to morph into other things, the more and more people get it, now you start seeing other side effects and other things happening in people. And it's just very tough for the medicine to know how it's going to change and then what's going to affect it. Again, we have a flu season every year, and everybody wants to compare this to the flu. We have a flu season every year, and people go and get flu shots, and they still get the flu because there's different strands of the flu, so people still get sick. Even if we get some way to have some sort of vaccine, we don't know if it's going to work. We don't know the side effects of that vaccine. So there's so many unknowns, but yet we're asking our young men to come back and jump into a college football season where it's a contact sport. You don't keep droplets off each other. You're exchanging droplets on every play, especially if you're talking about, the trenches. And so it's going to be very hard to say, as a parent that I am, to let my kids. I won't even let my kids walk into school right now. We're doing the at-home learning, let alone play a sport like that. There's just too many unknowns. And, when these coaches are coming out saying, well, why don't we know this or why don't we know that? Again, it's so young. You got to be patient. This isn't instant coffee. You got to let this percolate for a little bit, figure out how it's going to hit, the systems of every individual player, every individual human being. And then what other external, factors? I mean, I saw one study about 3 weeks ago, certain blood types are getting hit harder with this disease than other blood types. Okay, let's explore that. Let the science walk that road and see if there's something there. We saw a cardiologist from the Big Ten put out a report saying it's affecting the heart. We saw just a few days after that, a player in basketball, I think it was over in Serbia, I might be wrong on that, but pass away on the court because he had a heart attack from after his post-COVID. Heart was affected by COVID to the point where he tried to exert himself out of practice and he passes away. We saw a player in the NFL retire because, he has a heart aneurysm and it's at 5 millimeters, and they won't operate on that until 5.5 millimeters. But he's like, well, if I get COVID with what we're seeing now affecting the heart, that would really cause a problem for me and a health risk. So I got to retire until I can get this fixed and figured out and played. Now that's a heart condition that he, with medicine, with constant monitoring of it, he could have played football, but he decided to retire because of this COVID factor. He's unsure of where the road's going to take him. So when you talk about college football, and again, I was talking to Missouri yesterday, a friend at Missouri on their staff. He said, well, we're doing good right now, but campus opens next week. So, and we've seen UNC, Michigan State, Notre Dame, once campus opens, massive influxes of cases are coming their way. And now, yeah, you can sit there while this summer going, hey, they're better in this environment right now because they're in their bubble. And like we talk about, the bubble situation seemed to work. But as soon as that bubble bursts, we're seeing the pus just come running out, where, you got kids who are told you're not going to die from this disease, and it's all over the media. So at 18, 19, 22, I felt I was bulletproof. Heck, I did a lot of crazy stuff. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't understand their mentality. And in these situations, if you told me, oh, don't worry about it, you're going to survive it, even if you get it, I would probably go to house parties. I would probably go hang out and still, feel bulletproof still. but the cases are as soon as we see these schools open, they're closing almost just as fast. And so with college football, they haven't opened up their campuses yet. Once those campuses open up, if they do open up, you're going to find cases go up 2-3 weeks. As we know, they go in, victory parties start happening. People go to victory parties, cases are going to go up. It's a terrible tragedy for the business of college sports and the business of college. Like Murphy said, that the government's going to have to step in to keep these doors open at some point, because the model for financing colleges has been based on the NCAA basketball tournament, big time football, even great hockey programs bring in good money, lacrosse programs and soccer programs bring in good money. But think about it. We're talking about one full college season now, or calendar year, where college hasn't made any money from sports. They've already lost the tournament. They've already lost any summer stuff, baseball tournament stuff. Now they're going to lose football. It's a lot of money these colleges have lost that they've built their revenue around to pay for academic scholarships, to pay for field maintenance, to pay for facility maintenance around the campus, whether it be dorms or whatever. That was money in the budget that's gone. And Murphy, I'm sure you know the numbers better than anybody about how much money is going to potentially be gone for overall, everybody in this college seasons being scrapped. But I'm a parent. I'm not going to sit here and say that, and I stay up on this. And obviously, we do shows and I do podcasts and I do all this stuff to try to stay up on it. And I still don't know enough about this to be secure and feeling like my son or my daughter should go out and play a sport right now.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I will say this. The reason why Notre Dame has joined the ACC is because of money. They don't want to lose that revenue. But just like Notre Dame, just like North Carolina State, they began practicing. All of a sudden, there's a COVID outbreak on campus. I think I saw Notre Dame football now has to shut down training camp for 2 weeks. Oh, by the way, we have a game in 1 month, but we're not going to practice for the next 2 weeks. So we're going to, again, jeopardize your health and put you at a greater risk for injury. But I want to bring it back, Marvin, to the players that are opting out. They haven't really declared their intention for the draft, but they know, hey, I'm not going to play this upcoming season. And what we're doing at the NFL Draft Bible database is now talking to the 2021 guys, advising them on what to do, take the necessary steps and determining, hey, what's the best choice for your future? So what does that process look like for a player, a 20-year-old player who is getting all these conflicting reports, all different tidbits of information, lack of leadership? How do they go about this decision-making process with so much unknown surrounding them?
Well, I think you got several factors involved. I think the main one is always going to be fear. When people are in fear, it just makes your mind think totally different. And with a lot of the information that's been coming out, some of it's valid, some are invalid. And today, there's probably 10 things that we know about COVID. And guess what? By the end of the day, they'll probably say, here's another thing that they'll probably add another thing to that list, because we're not only talking about we're talking about a disease that can cause a lot of other different complications, as kind of what David is talking about with the heart. I mean, there's a lot of things that are affected to you. We just don't know. So what I kind of tell players is, as a player mindset, is, you know what? Sometimes you got to stop thinking like a player. And like I always say, stop thinking like a player and start thinking like a businessman. And I mean, you plan for your future. You continue to do everything you can do towards your future in preparation. If the time comes and things change differently at that particular timeline, then you continue to move with it. But to me, I would approach it no different than if I'm an NFL player and I'm in the off season, a free agency period. I got to continue to work out. I got to continue to do things to get better. I may not know if I may get a call this week, I may get a call next week or next month, but I still have to continue to be prepared. And that's one of the toughest things about football. It's because your future is controlled by someone else when they decide to call. I mean, I know going into my free agent, when I was released from the Jets after 11 years, hell, I didn't know what the hell to do for free agency. I was like a ball in high grass, lost. But I had to prepare every day until I got that call, and that is very tough because right now we're just approaching September, and we're talking about even for the time when you get in the off season, when you're talking about if there is a combine, you're still talking another 6 months before something like that happened, and that's a lot of time because there's so much more information that can come in between. But what I tell guys is, listen, you come, we approach everything as if everything is on the schedule with the same timelines, and we'll deal with it when we get there. But you cannot not be prepared, So, but I wanted to hit on something with you. What I'm just another part of when you guys were talking about the NCAA. Because I think it's an important thing in there, which you're kind of witnessing. I think in some ways it's almost like the unraveling of the NCAA as an organization. Early this year, you get things where players are being able to be paid for their likeness. Then now the players of ranks, teams are talking breaking ranks against them. I think that is what people are noticing now is that, what do we really have the NCAA for? I mean, the only time we really hear from is when they want to slap down penalties on us, things like that. But what do we really need? Is that a true governing body? I mean, because not all schools are treated fairly, and not all schools bring the same type of revenue that they all do. So, but they've been so silent on the matter, and that's what it's caused a lot of confusion. They've never came out as an organization and said, this, we'll do things this way, that way. They've been totally silent on that, but they want to tell schools, well, this is what you can't do. And, and that just, I think when you're looking at these players' perspective, a lot of times, a lot of these kids, and I hate to say it because I tell players never think this way. Football is not all you have. And a lot of these guys have that, this is my dream, all I have type mentality. And you can't be that way. I think this is an important time where you got to really focus on your degree. That's why you need your college degree in times like this. But I think what we're doing with the NFL Draft Bible, free agency database is amazing. The response has been great from players. I love it because it gives me an opportunity to answer these players' questions as much as I can. If I don't have an answer, I'll go back and find some stuff that can probably help them understand, what's going on a little better. Because, like I said, there's a lot of misinformation. But it's been great. I think it's a pivotal time for these guys, and I've gotten tons of questions. Guys are so excited about it that there's another avenue for them of guys that will be working for them now until 6 months or 5 or 6 months. So it really benefits a lot of the guys that have already kind of canceled the season already. So they're all ready to get a jump on it. But I expect that obviously it's just we're going to get knocked upside the head coming pretty soon as the other schools starts dropping out and we start growing more in popularity throughout a lot of these different avenues that I'm taking as far as trying to find players. And it's getting out there. So I think that it's going to be very pivotal at some point. I mean, we'll be able to, understand what's really going on with this COVID thing. But like I said, a lot of it's just all of the fear surrounding it, man. When people are scared, man, they don't think logically.
Well, there's a lot of that going on for sure. We appreciate everything you do with the NFL Draft Bible free agent database. And I'll make this point too. For those players that want to maintain their college eligibility and keep their options open, they might not want to sign with an agent yet. They might want to wait and see what happens with the spring. Get with Marvin, get in the database, get some advice. You see his Twitter handle at Marvin Jones Jets. You can contact me, RIC at NFLDraftBible.com. Or you can go to Maverick Sports and get an evaluation, a grade. David, tell everybody what you're doing there at Maverick Sports. Parting shot. You got a podcast out that's hot. Tell the people.
Well, I appreciate that plug, and you know, I love being on this shows with you and Marvin and John and all the guests you bring on, because you set such a great table to have such a high level conversation, and being included is just awesome. At Mavericks, what we're doing, we have a podcast at it's Mav Sports Take, and you know what, Ryan Roberts, myself, we go on every week and we try to take the hot topics. This week we had James Kirkland on from the University of Illinois talking about recruiting high school kids and what are some of the pitfalls them at the high school or at the college level are finding right now during COVID on how to recruit the kids, where to find them. And I've been doing more exploration into other schools and whether they're having trouble finding kids and recruiting and what the effect's going to be. One of the things from Wyoming was like, hey, they had a walk-on last year. They promised a scholarship. Now the coach wants to bring all the seniors back, and if they get another year, and now they might not have the scholarship, and the walk-on went to Wyoming thinking you'd get a scholarship this year. I mean, there's so many ripple effects that are coming that we're trying to learn about at Mavericks, so then we can apply it forward to the advice we're giving. You know, we're doing player evaluations, as Rick said. We'll write you a scouting report. If you're a parent right now listening, if you're a kid right now listening, we will just watch the film and give you a very unbiased, straightforward answer if you should declare for the draft or not. If you want a detailed scouting report, we can go very detailed, do background, do all that kind of stuff for you to make sure you have a proper decision basis. Again, we're not going to make the decision for you, but we'll give you an unbiased opinion on some information based on our experience that you can make your decision on. If you're an agent trying to evaluate kids right now, again, we can do the evaluation. We have a great agent consulting package where we'll work with you and consult you on your player selection, as well as how to negotiate, how to put your marketing material together when you do get a kid and you're starting to market them already. And again, the marketing cycle could be 6 months, as Marvin said, or longer now. So, you know, we're trying to be here and help everybody maximize their time right now in this troubled waters. Check out mavericksports.com and come over and see our services for sure.
Well, NFL Draft Bible appreciates everything that Maverick Sports is doing. We love working with you, David. Do we have you back here tomorrow, or are you traveling?
Oh, I'm back. I'm back with you all tomorrow. I'm as you can tell, I'm in the hotel room right now, and tomorrow I'll be back home.
Room 112, I already know. And of course, our regular co-host, riding shotgun with me as always, John Murphy, will be back tomorrow. Of course, John, a part of the NFL Draft Bible familia. Everything we do at the NFL Draft Bible, John has his hands involved in the mix. John, what's on the docket for tomorrow?
Well, I mean, we talked about the Jets. I mean, I think that'll be a very interesting thing to look at. You know, hey, there will be somebody. We've seen it in baseball, right? We saw the MLS, you know, they had return to action, and the clubs that got to the Final Four and the Final Two, and the eventual winner of that tournament was not who the experts expected. Right now, the Marlins and the Orioles, you know, and even the Tigers have a chance to make the playoffs in baseball. Who will be that team in the NFL? Is it the Anthony Lynn story of, hey, the team that is able to deal with this the longest and put up with all of the things, will there be a surprise team in the NFL? And even if it's not the Jets, who is it? And maybe we can identify that in the coming weeks as we lead up to the start of the NFL season. Is there a club that is set up or prepared best for dealing with the kind of the off-field scenarios of this and, you know, and the interaction of having guys like Marvin, you know, who would know from a player perspective what it would be like, David behind the scenes, what it would be like to be in this kind of scenario, running a team and the different things that go into it and could go into it. Like I said, you know, it's going to be very interesting to be able to keep your team on track on and off the field. How do you do that? And who might be that team that we could see sneak into the playoffs or even make a deep playoff run this year that without the COVID scenario might have not been that type of club this season?
Look out for those Arizona Cardinals. That's my pick. And you're seeing it all over sports, though. The Blazers beating the Lakers last night. You're seeing upsets in hockey. And there's going to be lots of upsets in the NFL. We'll be back to discuss it. You mentioned the Anthony Lynn philosophy. I'm looking forward to catching up on Hard Knocks tonight. Maybe we'll catch catch up with you listening audience on those topics tomorrow on the state of football. Oh my God, it'll be part 15 on a Friday. We'll get your kickoff started properly. I'm going to close the show with a parting shot of my own because I listen to all of our guests and our panel every day. We've talked about the lack of leadership at the NCAA. You listen to Marvin Jones and what he said, the fracture, the schism, the Power Fives, these exclusive conferences, what we thought were exclusive were just really money grabs because everybody can move and shake and go all over the place. Nebraska, Iowa, oh, you don't want – we can't bring you to the conference. Hey, we'll let your players transfer over. Let them come play. Here's what I'm going to tell you. NCAA. Mark Emmert, you're in way over your head, brother. I've seen you speak. You're just out of tune. You're disconnected. NCAA needs real leadership. They need somebody who can take them in the direction. You want to keep the Power Five together? Call me. 973-941-5955.